Alright, so I've been using the Galaxy Watch 5 Pro here for about the last month now, pretty much since it came out. And I was previously using the Galaxy Watch 4 Classic, and it made me realize they're very, very similar. Even though on the outside they look a little bit different, on the inside they're kind of exactly the same watch. So I just want to give you guys my review and thoughts about the Galaxy Watch 5 Pro after about a month. So as far as the design and the hardware, obviously on the outside, like I mentioned, they're going to be pretty different. So for one, I got different colors here. So we got the matte black look versus the silver colorway on the Watch 4 Classic. On the Watch 5 Pro, they went for a more, I want to say pro / in between classy look. Doesn't look as classy as last year's. I mean, literally last year's was named the Classic for a reason because it looks like a classy watch. This year, it looks more, I guess, sport-like in my opinion. So it no longer has that physical bezel. So if you're a big fan of the rotating bezel, you no longer have that, which is a bummer for a lot of people. Personally, me, I love the bezel. I thought it was one of the best like actual physical things to be able to navigate around on the OS and actually use the watch. I got really used to it, and hopping on to the Watch 5 Pro, it's very different now. So now I find myself barely using the digital bezel that is included, or I guess implemented into the Watch 5 Pro now, just because, I don't know, I don't like necessarily the feel of it, and I just find myself using it less. So I end up swiping around more often now instead of using the actual digital bezel. Now both of them are raised a little bit from the screen, so if you happen to smack your watch up against a flat surface, you should be good, because both of them, one has the physical bezel on the Watch 4 Classic, and on the Watch 5 Pro, it's just raised up a little bit on the edges. So one, the edges of the screen will be fine, and also if you again put it up against a flat surface, you should be fine so you don't scratch it up. And speaking of protecting the displays, the Watch 5 Pro does have sapphire crystal glass, and then the Watch 4 Classic last year had a version of Corning Gorilla Glass. So it is a bit stronger now, supposedly. I don't know how it compares in scratch resistance. I think it's also more scratch resistant. But the one thing I did notice is that it looks a little bit more glary compared to the Watch 4 Classic's display. And also the blacks don't look as deep. Almost looks like a mirror sometimes. It doesn't look that bad, but it is a bit of a different compared to last year's display. But both of them have a 480 by 480 pixel display. It's AMOLED, it's 1.4 inches, so very similar in the exact same size. And the Watch 5 Pro actually only comes in, I believe, a 45 or 46 millimeter. The Watch 4 Classic from last year came in a couple different options, one being a 41, I believe, and then also a 45 or 46. I just know I have the two biggest sizes here, so both of them still look pretty big. In my opinion, I think the Watch 5 Pro does look a little bit bigger and chunkier from the side. It looks a little bit thicker compared to the Watch 4 Classic. And the Watch 5 Pro sensor at the bottom does bulge out a little bit more. I think that's just the help of measurements and stuff like that versus the Watch 4 Classic. That's a little bit more on the flatter side. And the material is also a little bit different on the outside. So on the Watch 5 Pro, you get titanium versus on the Watch 4 Classic, I think there might be a titanium version, but I know this one in particular that I have here is stainless steel, which again is a little bit stronger, I believe. But both of them so far, especially the Watch 4 Classic, I've had it for well over a year now, and its durability wise, it's been holding up really well. I think it looks kind of still pretty much brand new, I would say in great condition. And the Watch 5 Pro, I've slammed it against very light surfaces, nothing crazy, not like rock climbing, anything like that, and you know, it looks pretty fine right now. And both of them have the buttons in the exact same position. You got your home button and you got your back button, so that's pretty much same functionality, and they both use the same 20 millimeter watch bands. So if you have the Watch 4 Classic now and are thinking of upgrading, you will be able to use the same watch bands from the Watch 4 Classic onto the Watch 5 Pro. And the Watch 5 Pro is still IP68 water and dust resistant rated, so same thing as the Watch 4 Classic. So if you're washing your hands or get caught in the rain, or if you're sweating a lot, you should be fine. But at the end of the day, both of them still look pretty similar and feel pretty similar in the hand. Both pretty comfortable. Again, they look pretty big, especially if you get the big size. So if you have small wrists, they're definitely going to look pretty chunky and pretty big on your hands. So as far as the weight, I think both of them are roughly the same. There might be a little bit of a difference in grams, but honestly, they feel pretty much the same, and in my opinion, feel pretty comfortable overall. But again, keep in mind the size. But as far as the performance, both of them, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, both of them I think have the exact same processor, that being some Exynos chip, and you also get 1.5 gigabytes of RAM and 16 gigabytes of internal storage. So you're gonna get the exact same performance, and at first I thought, oh wow, wait, the Watch 5 Pro is actually a little bit snappier and it feels much better, faster. I think that might have been just because it was brand new, because after a couple of weeks, I started seeing a few hiccups. It's not like terrible hiccups, but it was the exact same hiccups I would run into on the Watch 4 Classic. So that means the performance honestly is going to be pretty good on both of them. You shouldn't have to worry about the performance, which also again means if you have the Watch 4 Classic, you're not going to get a huge jump going into the Watch 5 Pro. And you're actually getting the exact same software as well right now. So I recently just got an update for the Watch 4 Classic that brought it up to speed with the Watch 5 Pro, that bringing it up to One UI 4.5 watch version with Wear OS 3.5. So the experience is exactly the same. And it's a good experience too. So you're gonna get a good OS here. I think it brings a lot of features and it's very customizable and just overall very easy to navigate in my opinion. So you have notifications on your left hand side so you can interact with them, respond to messages, whatever you want to do. You have your tiles on the right hand side so you can put a certain amount and also customize it and order it however you want. Personally, I really only use the music and also the Galaxy Buds controller that allows me to control the buds, switching them either from noise canceling, ambient sound or off, and also turn off the touch controls. But the now playing one or just music control, basically I use it to control my music when I'm listening to music on my buds or on the speaker or something like that. And at the top, if you swipe down, you'll have your quick settings. This I use all the time whenever I'm setting it to bedtime mode. I like this because I just set it to bedtime mode and it sets it to bedtime mode on my Samsung device as well, so it all works together. Basically puts the phone into Do Not Disturb and the watch into Do Not Disturb, and also turns off the always on display. And swiping up, you have access to all your apps. You can rearrange it how you want to. And now because you're running Wear OS 3.5 or just Wear OS in general, you do have access to more apps in my opinion compared to before when it was just running Tizen OS. So that's a good thing. It might not be as much as like the Apple Watch that has a big library, I'm assuming, or I bet. But there's a decent amount of apps now that you might be able to find some that are useful, or one that you were missing is now available. But as far as my overall watch usage, it's very smartwatch oriented, not health oriented. So if you're looking for a more in-depth health review, fortunately, I don't have that here for you. All I do as far as health, in fact, let's get that over with. All I do is count my steps and track or auto track some of my workouts. So my auto workouts are usually just running every once in a while, or if I'm just outside, working out or something like that, sometimes I'll play with the soccer ball or something like that. That's when it'll auto track me and stuff like that, which is not anything crazy. And even then, I don't even check the details that it gives me afterwards. I just let it track it and let it go with it. But both of them are pretty accurate for the most part. I see sometimes that one is more ahead or further ahead as far as the steps or distance, or it'll be way off from the actual treadmill. The treadmill will say I'm going, or I've reached like 3 miles, and the watches will still say I'm like 2.5 miles. So it might vary. I'm not entirely sure if they're accurate. It also might differ as far as like how they compare, because I'm wearing one on one hand and the other one on another hand, so that might be a little bit different. You can change it in the settings to tell it which arm you or hand or wrist I should say that you have it on. I did change it, but I don't know why it's doing it. But also both of them are linked to the same Samsung account, so that might be also why. So they might be intertwining and updating each other and just causing a whole mess. That might be why sometimes they're not at the exact same step count and stuff like that. Both watches can also track the exact same things, such as your ECG, your stress levels, your oxygen levels, your heart rate obviously, your body composition, and your sleep tracking. In fact, the Watch 5 Pro does come with a new sensor, that being the temperature sensor, which is only used for sleep tracking. So it might not make a huge difference, I'm not entirely sure, but the Watch 4 Classic still can track your sleep. As far as my other smartwatch usage, it's very simple stuff. So notifications, setting up timers, calls, Google Assistant, controlling my music, and finding my phone if I lose my phone. So you have a variety of like smartwatch features here, which I really enjoy using. So notifications, self-explanatory, keep my phone on silent and just receive notifications on my watch. Setting my timers, it's just to track stuff, especially when I go on break. Just pop it up, 1 hour, boom, I'm tracking my break. Google Assistant is brand new this year as well. Took them a year. It's supposed to come out during the Watch 4 Classic era, and it took them I think till a couple months ago to finally release it on the Watch 4 Classic, and also it comes to the Watch 5 Pro, so both of them can use the Google Assistant as well. Goodbye to Bixby. But if you have like a couple Samsung devices, I already mentioned that you can control your Galaxy Buds, but you can also find your phone if you happen to lose your phone. So just by going into Find My or Find My Device or Ring My Device, whatever the app is called, you can trigger your device to ring and boom, you can find your device. I don't know if this is available to all Android devices or if it's just limited to Samsung. I want to say it's all of them, because you can download the Galaxy Wearable app on other Android devices and be able to use the Watch 5 Pro or the Watch 4 Classic on with any other Android device. And in controlling the music and buds, as already mentioned before with the tiles, very useful to quickly switch between songs or pause music or raise the volume when you're not next to your phone. But overall, that's pretty much my usage. So like I said at the beginning, when I started talking about this, that sometimes I would encounter a few bugs where either the watch would completely freeze on me or just like it would be a little bit slow. But that was on both of them. It took a little bit for the Watch 5 Pro for me to experience that kind of stuff, but eventually I did experience a few hiccups. So for the most part, both of them will be exactly the same performance and provide you with very similar, if not exactly the same features and health benefits. As far as battery life, this is where I saw the better improvements from the Watch 4 Classic to the Watch 5 Pro. So the Watch 4 Classic 46mm only had a 360-ish milliamp hour battery, and the Watch 5 Pro has a 590 milliamp hour battery. So that alone should tell you you're gonna see decent battery upgrades here. So the Watch 5 Pro with the always on display on, I got anywhere from 2.5 to maybe 3.5 pushing it of battery life. With always on display off, you were definitely getting well around 4 days to 3 days minimum of battery life. On the Watch 4 Classic, I was getting anywhere from maybe 1.5 days to about 2 days with the always on display. And then with the always on display off, I was getting just about 2 to 2.5 days of battery life. So yeah, definitely big improvements from the Watch 4 Classic to the Watch 5 Pro that honestly warrants a pretty decent upgrade, like makes you consider want to upgrade, because it definitely is pretty decent improvements. As far as the charging speeds, you're going to get pretty much the exact same charging times, but because the Watch 5 Pro is a bigger battery, it technically means it is charging faster. So if you're using the new USB-C charger, both of them will take roughly under 2 hours, so maybe 1 hour and 50 minutes. If you're using the old USB-A charger or the wireless charger trio, both of them take about 2 hours and 20 minutes to fully charge. So yeah, you might be getting the exact same charging speeds, but again, because of that bigger battery life and better battery life, it's less of an inconvenience versus having to constantly charge or more consistently charge the Watch 4 Classic. At the end of the day, the Watch 5 Pro is a great watch in my opinion. If you're thinking about getting it, definitely get it. I think it's a great watch overall. Still a little bit expensive in my opinion, so if you can trade in something to get it a little bit less at its cost, definitely do so. As far as like upgrading from your older watches, if you have a Watch 4 Classic, I could say you could definitely hold off because you're getting the exact same performance, exact same software. But if your battery life is absolute crap, then yeah, definitely upgrade. The battery life improvements is crazy good, unless you live by that bezel. Same thing goes with the other watches. If you live by those bezels, maybe wait till next year, maybe they'll bring the bezel back, but who knows. But I definitely think it's worthy of an upgrade because small minor differences as far as the hardware, with that being the material being used, losing the bezel, but the battery life is where it makes a difference for me. So that's why for me personally, I'm going with the Watch 5 Pro, not just because it's new, but because of that battery life. I absolutely love it. So that's been it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Peace.